How can you go back to eating meat after being vegan? Those people obviously weren't vegan in the first place. The only reason Miley Cyrus couldn't stay vegan was because she did too many drugs. Ex-vegans just weren't doing it right. Alright, y'all, grab a drink and gather around. We're gonna talk about my ex-vegan journey. I've been thinking a lot about where to start with this, and I think the best place to start, and I think the number one question I had when I was still vegan was, how can you be vegan for years and know everything that happens in factory farms and what happens to the animals and all that stuff and the environment and everything and not stay vegan? How can you possibly eat meat again after that? And I didn't know either, but I've managed to boil it down to 3 key things that I experienced myself and that I also tend to hear from other ex-vegans as well. So the first reason was my biggest reason, and that was just I felt like crap and it just didn't matter anymore. It sounds really selfish and mean, especially when I put myself in the headspace I was in 3.5 years ago, halfway through my vegan journey. Like, if somebody had said that to me, I would have just been infuriated. And so if you're listening to me right now saying, like, what do you mean it got to the point where you don't care anymore? What I mean is my health got that bad. It really did. I was to the point where I was down 3 days a week. I could not move. I couldn't function. My doctors kept telling me my tests were normal, but I still didn't feel right. It was terrible. So that was the biggest reason. I just felt so awful that it didn't matter anymore. And I'm not gonna try to compare it to like this massive survival situation. But if you think about when people get stranded somewhere, there was this huge case where the soccer team got stranded in the Andes and they ended up eating their own family to survive. Like, that's a very extreme example of it, but it happens in smaller ways in everyday life where your body, for whatever reason, feels like you're not doing what it needs you to do, and it will start to activate parts of your brain that don't care about certain things like that anymore. I mean, you still care. Like, I still care that I'm eating animals. Like, don't get me wrong, I still care. But the way that you see it shifts because you understand, or at least I started to understand, that I am not going to be able to really live my life to its full capacity if I don't eat meat. And so a little bit of that piece of my survival brain started to kick in and override any disgust or guilt I felt while eating meat. The second main reason that I was able to start to eat meat again was actually just getting past the vegan research. So this is really interesting for me, but when you get past a certain point in learning about racism, classism, ableism, all of the isms, veganism, all of it, environmentalism, like literally all of the isms, right? When you get to a certain point in that, you actually start to almost get past what's out there. Like, what everybody thinks they know, there's like a whole level past that. And then also, just the more groups of people you talk to, the more you understand the different contexts in which veganism might not be the answer, or it might not help people. One of the biggest things for me was learning from indigenous people how veganism can actually exacerbate some of the problems that indigenous people feel from colonialism, because that still does echo into the modern era, and they still do deal with it, and they do very much see veganism as a continuation of that colonialism. There's also the fact that when you start to understand more about who's running these companies, who's donating to these companies, you start to notice really fast that all of these companies that I was buying from because I thought I was helping the environment are actually the same companies that I am trying to boycott because I don't appreciate what they're doing for the environment. It sounds really convoluted, and I will definitely address that in a future video because I could honestly speak, it would probably be a multi-parter, quite honestly. But yeah, I got to a point where I started to understand that eating local, not vegan, eating local is actually better for the environment because you're not shipping things, you're not spending all that money to ship, you're reducing the globalization of food products. And the thing is when farmers are able to farm locally, they kind of have to be in balance with the land, because if they're not continually replenishing their soil or continuously rotating their crops, or they don't have livestock for manure, they're going to deplete everything that they're doing. And so they have an incentive to be in balance with the environment. And that brings me to my third and final point here, which is it bothered me so bad the whole time I was vegan that I couldn't support local homesteaders. So there's a common misconception among vegans that factory farming and homesteading, it's all basically the same thing. And if you're the kind of vegan who, I totally get it. Some vegans are just they're so worried about the compassion component and the treatment of the animals that that's really all they're thinking about. And so when it comes to a homesteader or a local farmer or whatever, in their mind, it's not any different than a factory farm. That is a very extreme case of being vegan, and honestly, there's nothing I can possibly say to make those people understand where I'm coming from. I was never that kind of vegan. I just never saw it that way. As time went on, it really started to bother me that I'm going to the local grocery store so that I can buy gluten-based meat products instead of going to the local homestead where I can support local farmers who, again, are trying to promote balance in the environment. They have a relationship with their livestock. They use that livestock as a way to help keep their plant agriculture thriving. And I just felt this profound disconnect there, where I could see how it was beneficial to benefit local farmers, and yet I'm going to the grocery store and buying avocados, which, by the way, takes just about as much water, if not more, as a burger. So it just didn't feel right anymore. What I'm getting at here is a big part of the reason why I stopped being vegan was ethical reasons, which is funny because the whole reason I started being vegan was ethical reasons. So all that said, and now that I've made all those points, I just want to give a little bit of insight into how I actually felt when I started eating meat again, because I think that's important. First of all, I did feel guilty. Okay, let's just be totally honest here. I felt guilty. Hold on a second. Muga. Stop trying to open the cabinet. Hey, go chill. Cats. Anyways, I did feel guilty. Like, it was weird. It was definitely weird. That first piece of salmon, I will probably remember the texture forever. The first time I smelled raw chicken again for the first time. Like, I actually filmed it for my TikTok because it was funny, because it just was so weird. I haven't had it in forever. For the first few nights, and even still, I have moments where I'll go on vegan YouTube and find reasons why I should blame myself for not doing it right. I occasionally call my mom and say things like maybe I should have just eaten more tofu. So It's not easy. It wasn't easy. It wasn't like, oh, I'm just going to eat meat today, or I'm just giving into temptation. I think a lot of vegans, you know, when I think about where I was 3 years ago, I had this assumption that, oh, well, vegans who eat meat again are just weak and they just gave in. And that wasn't the case at all. It was literally a realization that if I'm sick, and everything around me, all my indigenous friends, and if all my indigenous friends around me are telling me that it's not even helping the environment, it just started to feel incredibly unnatural. About 50% of people actually do need meat products. It helps you convert things like vitamin A, it helps you convert certain proteins. And actually, some people, you have 3 different kinds of protein. You have essential, non-essential, and conditional, and not everybody can create those conditional proteins on their own. A lot of people cannot create those conditional proteins at all, and they need to consume them through diet. So I will talk about all of this stuff in future videos. I just wanted to give you a great kind of entry point to this. I definitely have a lot to talk about with it, and I want to be open and honest about what my journey was like, because when I was trying to figure out whether or not veganism was causing my health issues, it would have helped me a lot to have someone like me telling me what it was like, how they figured it out, and how they went back to it. Because one of the things that kept me sick and holding on to that vegan diet for dear life for so long was just not seeing the path back. So, next Friday, I will be back. We'll talk a little bit more about ex-veganism, what it looks like, what my journey has been like. Cheers, guys.